We all know digital is here, we all know it. I mean, come on, it's been around 10 years and people are still saying it's here. We keep hearing words like, oh, it's the new thing. It's not. Okay, and the number one concern that I've noticed in the surveys we've been doing, and it's coming up even as early as this morning, is ROI. And the key concern is, why is tracking ROI on digital media still seen as a concern here? Companies say like, I don't know how to, or I can't see a return. So where do you see a disconnect? What's happening?
I think the disconnect is not with the ability to track, but I think it's still the fact that media buyers and media agencies are generally uncomfortable with digital. You can make 4% on a $10,000 digital buy, or you can make 4% on a $1 million TV buy. Which one would you rather have? I think the metrics to measure digital marketing have been here for 14 years. So anybody who can't measure cost per click, cost per acquisition, click-through rates, post-click activity, really has been on another planet from the rest of us for the last 14 years. So I don't really think it is that difficult to measure the return on investment, specifically when it comes to the marketing and the media spend. It's certainly far more measurable than it would be within a traditional newspaper or outdoor, where it's like, your guess is as good as mine. Digital marketing by its nature is incredibly targeted and incredibly measurable. So I'm very surprised to hear that people still find digital marketing to be unmeasurable 14 years later.
Yeah.
Yusuf's being very kind there.
That's what I was about to say.
It's 4% of a digital campaign versus 25% of a print one, because the agencies are being paid huge amounts in commissions and added incentives by media. And that will only increase as media get more and more desperate for advertising revenue in the face of reality, which is the eyeballs are moving online. And it is infinitely trackable. I think one of the problems online publishers have, is they're not selling well enough. They're not going door to door and actually selling what they've got. We advertise in magazines where there's no BPA audit, where there's no ABC audit, but it's a car magazine and we sell cars, therefore we should be in it. There isn't a car website chasing my money and coming to see me and looking for my revenue. And until there is a compelling sale, it doesn't matter how many numbers Yahoo can give them. People with the vertical interest who want to sell cars or fridges or washing machines are going to pick the media they think is most appropriate as a context for their advertising. And right now in the Middle East, there isn't much online that gives them the feeling that, yes, here is the place I have found where I can put my money, and now I'm spending my money well.
So why do you say, Alex, that there isn't much online?
There isn't. The amount of online content, for instance, if you look at the magazines, all the magazines are mirrored online, or at least ITPs and CPIs and so on are. But in terms of magazines to take that great big FMCG spend that goes into newspapers, consumer electronics and the like, those websites really aren't there in the scale where advertisers are able to move to them. I mean, there's still a content dearth in the region, and then you add to all of that the fact that many advertisers still think very traditionally. And agencies aren't in a hurry to move them to Yusuf's 4%, where they can get Gulf News' 20-25%.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when you said, there is, it's right here to say it. But if that was the case, then you would see no disconnect. But what we're seeing increasingly, and it's literally a quote, I don't know how to measure it. So, and these are brands that are saying it. So is there an issue about enough education? Because let's be honest, there's digital marketing events every month, every week. There's training courses, etc. But if there is all of this education happening, why is there a disconnect? Why do you think so?
I don't know. I honestly don't know how anybody could, like you said, there's a digital marketing event literally once a month. Actually even more frequent than that when the weather's nice. Agencies like mine have actually offered to give free digital marketing seminars to anybody who will listen. In 2009, I think I conducted about 25 of them for free, just for the sake of trying to educate and raise the awareness of the industry. All of my colleagues within the industry, be it media buyers, agencies, whoever, are also conducting their own similar initiatives. So I'd be very surprised if people can't get access to the education that they need.
At the same time, we're involved in similar things to Yusuf's guys, the spot-on effective measure surveys, which aim to define the fact that there is an online community and it's very, very real. And one of the things I find slightly depressing is people sort of raise their eyebrows and are shocked by it. Golly gosh, that number of people online, I mean, it's all around us and it has been for years.
Yeah. So do you think then it's not about education but more about buy-in? Because again, the survey that we conducted said that we believe in digital media, my boss doesn't. He just doesn't see the value. But in the face of everything that's happening, and like you said, the eyeballs are moving online. Why do you feel that? Is it just that the newer generation of the CEOs will actually be the ones to actually harness this, and it's just a matter of fading out from the old to the new?
I think there's an element of that in there. I mean, you see that a lot with social media. You know, the young people are driving it forwards. They start doing it. It gets too big for them to handle. They ask for more resources, and the management says, "Well, where's the ROI?" Which always wants me to sort of reach across the desk and beat them to death until they stop twitching. Do you ever ask the ROI of a telephone? And of course you don't. It's the communications method that ties your company together. Well, the internet is as important, if not more important, than the telephone to any given business, even in the Middle East today.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. My next question is basically more related to technicalities. The CEO of a venture capital firm yesterday said, and I quote, "Telcos in the region, through their practices and deliverables in terms of bandwidth and technology, are simply revolving older marketing models. So, not the new ones." What is your take on that?
I think there's two bits to that conversation. I think one is the investment by telecom companies. Actually, let's grab the water.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Are these okay on the table, or do they get in the way of the
That's
camera?
fine. No, it's all good. It's all good. People care about what you say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Right. Okay. I think there's two arguments to be had with regards to the telecoms. I think number one, you can actually see quite clearly the difference in delivery in countries where you have competition and countries where you don't. We live in the most business-friendly, progressive, modern, advanced, outward-looking country in the region. And because we've had to live with this virtual monopoly on our telecom services, we still have the highest bandwidth rates of any market. Yes, we do have fast connections, but we still pay a fortune for them, especially when it comes to the mobile web. Contrast that with a country like Jordan, which does not have the natural resources of the UAE, has nowhere near the business infrastructure that this country does. But because there's an active competition within their telecom market, bandwidth is cheaper, mobile bandwidth is cheaper. So I think that's the first part, and I think that will change over time. And I think it's very encouraging for me to see people like Osman Sultan from Du actively coming to all our marketing conferences now, because people like Du recognize that they are the ones who are kind of becoming the carriers of our message. And so much of what we're doing now depends on the mobile web and 24/7 internet access, and they recognize that they're a facilitator to that. So I think in some cases some of the telecoms do recognize their role in being facilitators to that. I think the bigger picture is the monopoly that we have to work and live under that really stands in the way of progress within the region.
You also have to bear in mind with the telcos that they're all facing a very uncertain future. There's a great deal of concern amongst telcos. I mean, their biggest competitor in the world today is actually Google. And you've got Apple talking about a SIM-less iPhone. Now, if Apple ever gets away with that play, you've reduced all telecoms to purely being broadband suppliers, wholesalers of bandwidth, because if I'm not dependent on you for the SIM, I'm just going to go roaming from geo to geo, getting my broadband from whoever Apple buys that broadband from and packages it up as my seamless service. So that'll be a very interesting potential for the future. There's no doubt at all that the telcos, particularly in the Middle East, with the noble exception of Jordan, are still charging circuit switched prices for IP networks.
Yeah.
I mean, here in the UAE, 30 fils to send a text. That's 160 bytes of data on an IP network. That's the most expensive bandwidth anywhere in the world. And by the way, Japan pays 27 cents per megabit a month for broadband access. Which every time I pay my bill at the end of the month, I remember.
Wow.
It makes my heart go black.
Well, that explains why Japan's leaps and bounds ahead of everybody.
Average bandwidth to the home in Japan is 60 megabyte.
Wow. I dream of getting one with a broadband connection. All right. Okay. So, in light of that, because of the bandwidth issue that we see and the telcos, what industry do you see driving the most growth when it comes to things like social media marketing or digital marketing?
I think it's a mixture of everybody, really. I think it's not really for anyone anymore. I think there are certain industries that are untapped as yet. I think, for example, FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, being the big consumer brands, I think there's huge potential for growth relative to what percentage of the digital marketing spend they make up right now. But what you find is that anybody who can make it work is using it. You look at advertisers like Emirates Airline, for example. You think of the millions of dollars pumped through their online booking system now. They recognize the value of digital marketing as a revenue channel. Hotels, governments, everybody really. I think the ones who people who can derive genuine measured kind of deliverables against it are the ones who are doing it the most. But I think consumer brands specifically are still very much the sleeping giant when it comes to this.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree. Low-cost airlines, I think, have been key in driving adoption, certainly in the airline industry, because their business model is based on airlines. They've been interesting. I've been doing a lot of work with Aramex, looking at their social media efforts, and they've been doing some stunning work. But I don't think there's any one given industry that's defined it. Hotels are pretty quick onto the social media bandwagon, but that's because they just saw it as a cheap marketing channel.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think Yusuf raised a good point in terms of the FMCG market. Yeah, because at the end of the day, that's what we use daily, and that is literally advertising everywhere you go, except on a digital platform right now, which is actually being done very well in the UK, for example. All right, so, and this is something I think Yusuf, you would be be inclined to answer, is that do you feel brands should choose specialist digital marketing firms to manage their strategies, or stick to their traditional big name advertising agencies that have a digital arm, so to speak?
Yeah. Given that I'm an independent digital agency, I think you can imagine where I stand on this. No, but the reality is, actually, I wrote an article about this for Campaign last week, and adding an E or an I to your logo and hiring 2 programmers and calling it a new media department doesn't make you a digital specialist. The interesting thing, especially when it comes to social media and digital kind of communications, what you find more and more is that the ad agencies are the worst at it. If you find any successful digital or social media campaign requires much more than just a one-off 6-week hit. You need a conversation, you need a relationship, you need long-term planning. And I think the challenge what's happened with the ad agencies is you've had an evolution where they all went, oh, this internet thing is really interesting, let's all create E's and I's and interactive divisions of our business. And what they've realized now, 10 years later, is that it's not feasible. You need to think of digital as part of the whole, not as this weird Star Wars thing over here on the side. So what's happened is that they've all pulled it back in, and they say we are all digital now. So there's no I and E and interactive anymore. It's just one agency, because they recognize that understanding digital has to permeate through the entire organization, not just with those IT guys in the corner. So they are getting there, but my view right now is that if you want, my view is that really there's something to be said for being a specialist, and there's something to be said for living, breathing, and waking up every day thinking about the web. And I think when 1%, 2% of your business is digital, why would you give it more than 1 or 2% of your attention? Whereas for someone like me, I've lived and worked in the region for 15 years in the digital space. We started Flip because we felt that, digital agencies needed to be independent, they needed to be able to think for themselves, and not just be the digital arm of the CRM arm of the ad agency.
I think Yusuf's days are numbered. Because, I thought you were going to last me. Because it's going to become commoditized. I mean, in 10 to 15 years, there will be no such thing as a digital agency, it'll be an agency. What I think is interesting, where Yusuf's days aren't numbered, is that by then the revenue model will have changed. And like telcos, like book publishers, like magazine publishers and newspaper publishers, the challenges that agencies face is not necessarily to their existence, but to their existence in their current form, their current revenue streams. They're going to have to change the revenue model, and you can't depend in the future on getting 25% of Coke's entire gross advertising spend and using that to fund your agency. Yusuf charges differently to that, we charge differently to that. We're a halfway house. We went leaping into digital, and our clients pulled us back and said, well, we don't actually want to go 100% digital. So we have some clients who are analog, we have some clients who are 100% digital and social, and most of our clients sit in the middle and mix the two, and we're able to do that for them. But the revenue models change. Our revenue model is a cost per hour revenue model, so that will always be the way. Flip charges differently to an advertising agency. The ad agencies are going to have to charge differently if they're going to compete with the likes of me and the likes of Flip for customers' dollars in a world where media are not paying out 25% commissions to agencies, and in a world where creativity can be crowdsourced. I don't need to depend on one agency for my creativity. I can go out to the web. Similarly, our business has changed from an everything shop where we did everything. Today we outsource. You know, we have an ecosystem of people we work with, people like Flip and like Effective Measure and Sicari for SEO work. We work to manage those resources, put them together for a client. So that's kind of changed what we do because we're a PR company. So we've had to change our business model to a great degree to meet this. Ad agencies are going to have to do the same. And when they do, Yusuf and his like will see competition in the digital space, and then we'll all be digital.
I think the interesting thing, one thing we always say is that the easiest way to put ourselves out of business is to do exactly what we did last year. And what you find is that technology changes, trends change, what clients require changes. I mean, I think that the fundamentals don't change, but I think the actual delivery of these materials do change every year. If you look at things like the iPhone or the iPad, or these devices that didn't even exist 3 years ago, that have now become such game changers that, you know, we've had to invest in developing technologies, developing applications, learning how to work with that stuff because our clients require it. Now, in the Middle East, quite often, agencies have to be ahead of the curve because everybody wants an iPad out. Nobody's quite ready to pay for one yet. So what we've had to do is we've had to go out and invest in developing our own iPhone apps, iPad apps, Android apps, so we can learn about these technologies so that when people come to us to work with us on them, we can say, we're not going to learn at your expense. We've already been through our own learning curve to be able to do that. That's the sort of investment we can make that my colleagues within advertising agencies aren't prepared to make it and don't have the capability to make.
Yeah, and as a result of that, I think you also get to work with an agency that understands the dynamics, that understands what's going to work and what's not going to work because they're steeped in it.
Well, on that note, Alex, your input, PR in that case. I want to draw on what you said. It's all about, I know what you said. In the previous question, we spoke about how the whole crowdsourcing thing, a lot of what's happening right now, especially a lot of the bigger brands that are successful in digital marketing, and especially social media, are using user-generated content to actually advertise themselves. What happens in the PR stream? I'll give you an example. When the whole Egypt crisis broke out, there were discussions on blogs among journalists that the average person with a flip cam or with a Twitter on his cell phone is a journalist now because he's breaking the news as it happens. But is that really journalism? Because with wires that publish free PR, like PR Web, etc., where's the line drawn? Because here you have people who are just sending out content to the web, tailoring it as news when it's not really news, in order to push a brand live online. So where do you see yourself as in terms of spot on PR, etc. in that? How do you compete with that?
It's something of a free-for-all, but I've never believed in PR as a media control vehicle. That's never the way we've done public relations. Because of the nature of the Middle East and the media across the region, we've never been 100% media focused anyway. We've always had a strong element of going direct, you know, with events, seminars and so on in the region, because it's very hard to change a heart and a mind in a newspaper that doesn't engage hearts and minds. So moving forward, there's a huge challenge for media. This idea that everybody is a journalist. No, everybody's not a journalist. Everybody is a spectator. Everybody is a witness. And we can share witness so much more quickly across the web. You know, if your aquarium's leaking, the afternoon of the leak is not a great time to go out and tell everybody there's nothing happening when Gulf News is running video of people swashing about in water up to their knees. You can't deny that the big paint factory is on fire when the big paint factory on fire is being shared online by hundreds and then thousands and potentially millions of people. So, you know, your ability to keep the genie in the bottle by using public relations is very, very limited these days. But really what you need to be doing as an organisation is saying, well, do I need to be out there and part of these communities? Because really, organisations don't do bad, they don't set out to do bad. Obviously you can talk about your Union Carbides and BPs and the rest of them, but being stupid is not necessarily being bad. And you can be forgiven for stupidity if everybody out there is with you, believes in you and has a track record of trust in you. So that's really what companies need to do in order to have communities understand when they're not perfect and understand when they make mistakes, is be out there and show that they're striving and doing their best for everybody. That's one of the reasons I admire Aramex. Get onto Twitter and bash out on the keyboard, "I hate Aramex." Within 2 seconds, somebody will pop up and say, "Can I solve your problem for you?" And they will. And so I think that's the way the companies have to behave. That takes PR into a very real dimension where it is your relationship with the public. That's where PR started in the 20s with Edward Bernays and Ivy Lee, and that's where it's going back to now. The job of obfuscation, the job of stopping journalists having access, I've never seen that as the role of PR. The role of PR is to facilitate communication, and ideally that should be transparent communication that's two-way, so that you're listening to your customers as well as talking to them, and not just sending out blind marketing messages, which is one of the things that this end of the era where you can just dominate by advertising using megabucks, that's over now. It's not quite over, but it's towards the end. And so now you have to talk to digital communities, have to talk to people online and share information online. And Google is the most incredible way of sharing information. I'm sure Yusuf, most people at the conference, if I come across a new word or concept or even person, I'll Google it. So the very way that we're taking in information, consuming information is changing, which means that there's going to be an amorphous, cloudy thing ahead of us all. It's like, what are the changes going to be? What's the shape of this going to be in 10 years? And I wouldn't sit here and pretend that I knew the answer to that. I can see some of the dynamics and some of the ways in which it's going, but the end result, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, like you're saying about this clash between social media, this instant web, this uncensored communication, and the way we've always done things in this part of the world. And brands and governments are still trying to get their heads around that. And like you said, that Dubai Mall Aquarium is such a good example of that, where, a company spokesman stands up and says, "There's no leak," and there's 100 kids with their mobile phones in the mall going, "Oh, really?"
Oh, and the security guards trying to stop them.
But this is the interesting thing, and this is what you see, I read a great article about WikiLeaks a few months ago where they say WikiLeaks is not the problem. WikiLeaks is just representative of this greater symptom of people wanting access to free and open information, the fact that you cannot bury secrets anymore in the desert. And what you found with WikiLeaks, and that if the United States government, probably the most powerful thing in the universe, is unable to keep a secret, what hope does any brand or any government have? And you've seen that already with Tunisia and Egypt and Libya and everything, where a large reason why a lot of this is happening now is because the lids come off on so much, and this inability of people to be able to communicate, this newfound ability for people to be able to communicate and to gather. And I read a very interesting article the other day about Egypt, saying that by shutting down the web, they may have actually accelerated the revolution, because up until then a lot of people could have sat in their homes, looked at the internet and found out what was going on. But without the web, these people had to come out of their houses, come down into the street, and then say, "Oh, well, we might as well participate in this revolution." A big problem with the web, talking about something like Egypt, is what people call slacktivism now, where people think that if I wear a yellow bracelet, or if I like a charity on Facebook, or if I follow somebody on Twitter, I've done my bit to change the world or show advocacy towards a brand or a cause. But the reality is that you haven't. All you've done is push a button. And that's why we've seen with things like President Obama's campaign 3 years ago, the revolutions in Egypt. It doesn't matter how many fans you have on Facebook or how many tweets you get. Ultimately, whatever movement you build has to drive a real impact on the street, be it buying your product, advocating for you, voting for the black guy to be president, or doing whatever's necessary. But simply liking something on Facebook or being followed on Twitter doesn't actually mean anything, really.
I agree with that. Beyond it also, there is a rise in online activism. It's one of Spot On's predictions for 2011. We didn't really know that Egypt was going to happen. But online activism isn't necessarily bringing down your government. It's also having causes that you believe in and getting together and supporting those causes. In our region, we've never seen so much social activity being driven by the web, tweet-ups and Twestivables and Geek Fests and all the rest of it. And so I think that, yes, there is the issue of slacktivism, but we're also seeing unusual activism, because communities can come together and organise and say, well, no, I want to change this.
Yeah, there's a very, very similar one. It's like when the breast cancer week happened, and then the new way they're marketing the Terry Fox run in the past, you had to wait for Gulf News to put an ad about when the Terry Fox run is going to happen, where they're going to do it. And now everyone's sending each other forwards through Facebook. This is where I'm going to be, and RSVPs. So yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the whole revolution and how it happened. I want to twist on that and come back to a topic we discussed at last year's clip, which you guys would remember, was Arabic marketing. And it's funny because after a whole year of coming, I think, back to square one, we're still seeing people responding to our survey and saying, yes, but it's still a problem for me. And I will quote this, it's very interesting. Even getting a website done in Arabic is a nightmare here. Why is there this disconnect in that aspect, considering it's the most widely spoken language among the 300 million people in this region, and yet the focus is still on, and at the risk of sounding very biased, the focus is still on English language quality, copy, and advertising. Whereas I increasingly see this even in our business, is that when we approach somebody to do an Arabic version of our, or Arabized version of our campaigns, it's literally just translate, get it out there. So why is this there? Shouldn't it actually be the other way around?
I disagree in a lot of ways with what you're saying, and I think communications in Arabic have never been more important, in a large part because so many of our clients right now are Arabic government clients, and so many of the advertisers are Arab government or semi-government organizations who have to advertise in Arabic because A, they're Arabic organizations, and B, so much of their constituency is in Arabic. I think the biggest challenge you find in Arabic, and I'm sure you have probably a different perspective from a PR point of view, but is in the writing. I think a lot of people struggle to find good quality Arabic copywriting, and so much of it is an afterthought. But I don't really see why marketing in Arabic should be so difficult. I know with a lot of the clients we work with, the Arabic concept has to come first. Because so much of their target audience is in places like Saudi Arabia or Jordan or Egypt, where these people speak Arabic far more predominantly than they do in our multicultural bubble that is Dubai. So in a sense, I don't really think that's a very fair statement, given the fact that there is a lot of Arabic development work, there is a lot of good work being done in Arabic. And curious to know from a PR perspective, maybe what
There's undoubtedly this content gap in the region. And I think you have to pay more for Arabic web work than you necessarily would if you were willing to settle for English, because good Arabic does come at a premium, and many people in an environment like this bubble, as Yusuf calls it, will be English and Arabic speakers, but won't be so ready to read Arabic because they don't come from such a strong Arabic background. This is more of an entrepreneur. If you go to Syria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, you're going to come up against Arabic. One of the things that's happened up until now is we've been in a prolonged early adoption cycle with the internet, with digital. You know, the stats was 58% of people on Twitter are Arab, but 99% of tweets are in English. Facebook in Arabic is relatively new. What we're starting to see is the adoption, the newcomers are coming to Arabic. So Facebook Arabic is growing exponentially. It's enormous. And so I think what you're starting to do is get out of that early adopter English expat dominated, Western educated dominated internet, and you're starting to get to the street, you're starting to get to the shabab, and those guys want Arabic, and that will drive the need for Arabic content and for people to take Arabic more seriously. And again, you've got markets like Jordan where so much IP comes out. I mean, that really is much more Arabic than a market like this, where we don't generate very much IP.
Yeah, I think it's basically what Yusuf touched on. Is more, less to do with the content that's out there and the strategies and the marketing. It's more to do with quality Arabic that's going out. So you have proper Arabic copywriters, for example, as opposed to just somebody who can write Arabic and Arabize something.
Content is a massive issue when it comes to Arabic,
Yeah.
and if you give a piece of Arabic copy to 5 Arabs, you'll get 5 opinions at least. You know, so it is something you have to work with, and you know, we work with all our partners to make sure that they're happy with the Arabic copywriting they get. Quite often I actually use a 65-year-old man in Sweden to do my Arabic copywriting, because there's a certain level of craft that's required, you know, and I have to go all the way to another continent to get it. You know, but I mean, you know, Arabic is a necessary part of our business, and probably 90% of all the solutions we build now for our clients are bilingual solutions, English and Arabic versions of websites or pieces of communication.
In your collective experience, both Alex and Yusuf, and this is something that came into my first question regarding medium-sized businesses, is where should a typical small to medium enterprise start with its digital marketing strategy if they don't have one? Right?
I think just start wherever it makes sense. You know, I think each of those channels offer you something different, and the trick is really kind of figure out where you can be good and be it. You know, our friends at Wild Peter are such a good example of that, where something like Twitter really lended itself to them because it was such a conversational story, and it was such an evolving story over time, where that ongoing conversation with their constituents, where they were building up a fan base of people who'd never even eaten their food before, was a really good vehicle for them. You may find other brands want to use something like Facebook, or start their own blog, or whatever it might be. But the reality, the good thing about all of these is that really, A, you don't have to be a techie IT geek whiz to be able to use them, and B, most of these tools are available for free. So if anything, it actually really lends itself towards small businesses who don't have large corporations' marketing budgets.
Walk out of your business, change your clothes, put on a different hat, and pretend to be your own customer, and Google yourself, and then start Googling different things you look at for yourself. Look at yourself online, look at the online conversations that are taking place about you, and then make up your mind what you think of yourself, and then put that in the box and work out how you're going to change it. Maybe you're perfect, but very, very few businesses are. I always have this analogy, I'm a bit like a doctor. You know, you come and see me, and my first question to you is, what's the issue? Oh, there are no issues, everything's just fine. Well, you don't need a PR then, goodbye. Same thing, you never go to a doctor's surgery and say, you know, I'm perfectly well, thank you, doctor. So there's got to be some sort of complaint, there's got to be something you want to achieve with your communication. If you're the perfect company with perfect communication, perfect customers, 100% satisfaction, then great, you don't need me.
In the interest of the customers who are going to watch this and the audience at large, you mentioned Wild Peter. Now, for those of us in the marketing industry, we know what happened with Wild Peter, we know, but a lot of people don't. Could you just give us a brief summary of how Wild Peter did what it did and what they achieved?
Do you want to give it, since you're involved with them from a
I'll do it half-half.
Yeah.
I mean, what they did for a start was they started asking their audience on Twitter, and the audience grew quite quickly. They started asking questions about their business, how they should define the business, what kind of chairs we should have. These are the menus we're looking at, what do you guys think of them? So what they did very, very quickly was build a level of engagement with people who felt some sort of ownership of this restaurant because, well, they contributed to it. I think that was the biggie.
I think the interesting thing with them is that, you know, the challenge they had was that they were a year late in opening. So they had to maintain some sort of conversation over the course of that year, and that's where platforms like Twitter and Facebook worked really well for them, because like you said, they were able to go to IKEA and say, we can't pick between the red chairs and the green chairs, what do you think? Put the question out to their followers and got an answer, and then picked a winner based on the votes they were receiving. So the interesting thing about that was that people like me who'd never eaten their food, who'd never met them and never even stepped into their restaurant, suddenly became an invested shareholder in their business without having given them a penny of my money. You know, and the really interesting thing was that when they actually opened, it was hilarious how people on Twitter were celebrating, like, Mabruk, Mabruk, Mabruk. And one journalist friend of ours, Tom Gara, actually wrote, breaking news, 2 Arabs open a shawarma restaurant. You know, where it's really such a good example of how 2 people with virtually no marketing money took such a mundane concept and turned it into the social media darling of 2009. You know, so the opportunities are there for people to embrace these technologies, to do interesting things. You just have to do it. And you have to be willing in a lot of ways to let go of your old prejudices when it comes to corporate comms and PR, and actually be willing to open yourself up for criticism. And because if you ask a question, you will get answers.
Yeah, let's not forget, these guys opened the restaurant a year late and nobody complained. And then they're charging 17 dirhams for a shawarma and we're all happy to eat them. I mean, what's the ROI? You tell me. It's remarkable. There are other examples as well. I mean, look, take the example of Do. Do went out to social media and goofed horribly. They just ran into a brick wall. They got everything possible you could get wrong. They picked themselves up, dusted themselves down, examined themselves, and went back in again really, really well. And they're getting a lot of accolade for that. Jackie's Electronics, great example, allied to Meredith. Jackie's went into social media, used Twitter to shout at people. People shouted back, Jackie's re-evaluated, went back, and now they're very much a social media darling. So there's nothing wrong with going and trying it out and getting it wrong and then going back and getting it right. The key is going back and getting it right, which means you need to listen to people. And where Wild Peter was powerful was they started out with a platform of listening to people. That's where they started. Here we are, we're listening.
So basically, despite the fact that they were late for a year, they used that to their advantage.
Yeah, I mean, we every single delay we've grown with them. because we're sharing the delays, we're sharing the reasons behind the delays, you know, we can understand that.
Yeah.
And it must be frustrating for you guys.
Yeah.
Whereas if they come into it with a big ad campaign and told us how marvellous they were, we'd be like, yeah, big swinging Mickey. You can't even open on time.
Okay. You mentioned that it was the social media darling of 2009. What, in your opinion, is the best social media campaign in the Middle East for 2010?
Unfortunately, so many stand out as disasters, and there's very few
Let's not mention
success
those.
stories you could share. But I think really just looking at brands like Do and Etisalat and how they've really gone from using things like Twitter as marketing channels to actual customer service channels, and genuinely engaging and reaching out to customers. I think it's been a very good example for how people should be using this space online. No real standouts, really. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of people who are doing it well. People like Jackie's, and so you see little brands doing things, but there's no real standout in terms of somebody genuinely building a movement or creating an epic brand campaign or an epic movement online that I can really recall last year. I mean, there's a lot of good little blips along the way, but nothing like epic.
In its way, that's probably a good thing, because more good little blips are actually what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is the good little blips used to stand out as epic. Now they're just part of a growing movement in the market.
I think in a way it's really good, because if you look at how Etisalat had to completely, I mean, again, it's dangerous to always keep talking about Twitter, but it's easy. But it's a really good way to show how quickly and how well Etisalat reevaluated their Twitter strategy based on what Do did, because Etisalat started and they tweeted 6 times in the first 6 months. They were following 18 people and they had about 600 followers, and they refused to engage or reply with anybody. All they would do was talk about special promotions or come visit us at GITEX. And obviously what they saw was the stratospheric growth of Do when they stopped being a marketing channel and became a genuine customer service and added value channel. And you can see how Etisalat's completely reinvented itself online to become the same sort of customer service channel now. And I think it's a really good way to show how genuine best practices can actually spur competition and increase the game for all of us. Because for those of us who have to work with a particular telecom provider based on where we live, you know, the fact that we now have decent customer service channels through these channels are actually a benefit to everybody, including the brand, obviously, because I'm sure they're finding a value and back to your ROI out of it, measured in a lot of different ways.
We might not have had a regional darling last year. I think one for me that was most fascinating was Heathrow and the airlines over the snow at winter, because all the airlines took to Twitter very, very quickly to get information out to consumers, and that meant information flow that you otherwise would not have been able to have encompassed. So I thought that was an interesting example of how an entire industry used, again, specifically Twitter, to get information out to stranded and frustrated passengers, myself included.
Okay. I want to just put this in a nutshell now for everybody, just because we've had a couple of conversations today about this. I asked some people over Twitter to get back to me on questions that they'd like to ask you. And one person said here is that 20-year-old real estate company, 60-year-old Arab CEO, no interest in social media. What do I do?
It depends if you're the 60-year-old CEO or not, isn't it?
I think there's an education job to do. Just show them what other people are doing in a lot of ways, because I guarantee you that other people in your industry have come up against the same problem. And the question is, take a look and see what people have been doing and try to learn from it, especially if you're trying to sell the concept to somebody else. And experiment. You know, a lot of these tools are free, a lot of these channels are easy to get into, and it's very easy to demonstrate a result. I mean, we work with a company that does aluminum roof cladding, probably the least digital, least sexy, most 20th century industry you can imagine. But we use search engine marketing with them, and they've been able to generate multi-million-dollar leads on the back of those little text-based ads in Google, you know, at 25 cents a click. So you can measure and demonstrate genuine ROI. And you know, with this particular client, he can't get enough of digital marketing now, because he realizes that even in his very B2B, very, you know, kind of handshake, very human-based business, he still finds a value for digital marketing. So I think the trick is try things, you know, and look out for best practices within your industry.
I'm amazed at how much kinder Yusuf is than I am. The technology adoption life cycle still reigns supreme, and it is the shape of a humpback whale. At the tail of that is the aftermarket, the people who are never going to adopt technology early or be part of the mainstream market. And the great truth of all technology is you never sell to those people, because they'll drive you wild and waste your time. So my answer would be find the 20-year-old running a 2-year-old real estate company and go and sell to him, because the 60-year-old will come round when he's got no business left, and not before.
Fair enough. Smart. All right. I'll just take one more tweets because we don't have much time. You're both very experienced digital mavens. If you could go back and change one thing in the way you operated, what would that be?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, I think for us, so much of my career has just kind of evolved with the environment around it. You know, we've I think like a lot of companies, we've grown with the success of Dubai, and we've worked on a lot of the most iconic brands in the country. So I can't really say I would change things, because working on Nakheel, working on A'mal, working on these wonderful brands and being part of their story has been epic. And I don't really think there's much I would change, because I think, you know, if we've seen things we want to change, we've just gone back and changed them. So far so good.
Yeah, got no complaints really.
That's the beauty of Dubai, isn't it? That's the beauty of Dubai, I think. It allows you to grow.
It does, and the nature of digital is that it's very, very fast moving, and if you're part of it, if it's part of you, if that's part of your daily life, you tend to sort of encompass it and sort of move along with it. I can't think of any sort of great regret where I go back and say, no, let's do that hugely differently. Part of me says, okay, start down this road earlier, but I don't think earlier was right. No, it's all good.
Okay.
It's a Dubai answer for you.
That's okay. Just the last two questions. We already spoke about the sheer number of digital events, but just like to reiterate, Click, when we started off in 2006, we've been around for a long time. It's been around a good 5 years. We're the longest running digital event, if not the first. I think we were the first. What do you see happening on the floor this year? Because Alex, you chaired last year. You saw the activity, you saw the discussions. So what do you see in terms of happening on the floor this year in terms of discussions? A lot of people are interested, a lot of people are coming. We have more people actually coming from telcos as opposed to last year. There are people from the hotel industry again. But we also have the smaller independent operators. So tell us more about what you expect.
I don't know, it's difficult to say what you expect this year. You'll either expect more consensus or more argument. I'd like to think more argument. I'd like to think more people want to challenge and test these assertions that they need to go online and this is important and this is the time. I rather hope that there's more acceptance that there is a change coming, that people need to change themselves in order to encompass what's happening. I hope we've moved along a little bit, and I really would be depressed if we're having the same argument about publishers versus advertisers, no Arabic content in the region, what are we going to do? I'd like to think we've moved on.
Why should I go online?
Why should I go online, yeah. We should dole out punishments this year for that. But I think also, the event itself should be a lot more online. I mean, we're talking to you today with a flip camera. I was at events last year that didn't use social media, digital or online at all to promote the event. And I wouldn't be going to those this year because I think that's absolutely critical. How can you run an event in digital that doesn't use digital? But no, debate that's moved on would be nice. And a lot more questions from people who say, you know, now is the time to change, what are we going to do about it? That would be nice as well.
I think the only thing we'll probably see a lot more conversation on this year is mobile. You know, it's something that has grown in leaps and bounds in the last year, and you know, you're seeing a lot more focus of that within the events in the region, within the conversations that we're having now, where people are talking about mobile apps and so on. I think the other one maybe is content creation as well. I think a lot of brands recognize that just creating a Twitter page or a Facebook page and talking about how awesome you are isn't the way forward. And a lot of brands, like what you're doing with this Flipcam, are investing in creating their own content, creating their own stories, and putting them out there because the barriers to entry are so low and because people do genuinely want added value within their conversation. So I think talking about content creation, talking about mobile, hopefully we see a lot more of that.
Yeah. I agree. You also find, I think, an increasing number of companies will find, or will be finding, that running competitions is not actually the future of social media. It's a natural first thing to do, but once you run 3 or 4 competitions to tell us what you think of this colour of jeans, you've got to go somewhere else, and that's where content creation will be interesting. Yeah. Mobile, I mean, Flip were the first guys in Dubai to develop a mobile app, which they did out in the middle of nowhere because nobody would pay them to do it. Now there are people actually developing apps here. I think, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, we're going to hear a lot more talk of apps.
Yeah, I mean, BlackBerry's Playbook is going to be out next week. You have the iPad 2 coming here soon, and then you have Motorola re-pushing its entire thing for the Zoom. So
Android tabs are going to go bonkers this year.
and Sony Ericsson.
Oh yeah. The new Xperia.
The new Arc, and they've got a PlayStation phone coming out later on this year.
Yep, the Xperia PlayStation. That's ridiculous. All right. My last question, gentlemen, is you both are the experts of digital right now. If there was one specific topic you, Yusuf, and you, Alex, want to see discussed at Click 5.0, what would that be?
He said the hard ones to last, doesn't he?
Yeah. I think it's all going to be covered. I mean, I think there's no one specific issue where I'm like, we really have to talk about this, because I think we talk about this stuff all year. You know, we talk about this stuff for fun, like when we're out together. So I think the conversation's taking place. What I would like to see more of this year is genuine case studies and success stories or failures. You know, so much of what we see at conferences in the region are so hypothetical, or so, let's look at what Starbucks and Nike and, you know, Southwest have done in the US, where genuinely what I actually want to see is how have brands taken this medium and adapted it for a very different cultural context over here. So hopefully we'll see a lot more case studies and a lot more real-world experience from people. I think that's where you can generate a lot of real value for the audience in terms of actually sharing successes and failures from the region.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more from the big advertisers about what they think of this stuff and what their strategy is moving forwards. Because last year at one of the events, I can't remember which one, we were talking to General Motors in the audience, who were saying that, you know, none of these guys have come to me and sold to me, but I'm interested and I wanted to buy. So I think that would be useful, is to look at some of that big money and what it thinks. You know, what Pepsi, Coke, GM, Johnson & Johnson, Ford, what are these guys thinking? Where are they playing, and what are their timescales? I think that would be valuable to the industry in terms of working out how we approach that kind of company and the kind of offers that they're interested in from the digital industry. Because if they're still spending the vast majority of their money in analog, we're missing somewhere. I mean, one of the effective measure survey we did last year during Ramadan showed that TV viewership did not change. Not one more minute of TV was consumed by over 7,000 online people across the Middle East and North Africa during Ramadan. They watched TV 2 hours later, they didn't watch any more TV. And yet how much money do those big advertisers pour into television? So I'd be very interested to find out what their mindset is, what's going on in their heads.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been a great conversation. I hope the audience enjoys this. I'm sure they will, because I definitely enjoyed it. I look forward to Click, and we'll be happy to share all the feedback we get from the video as well.